The stone docks of Port Bray house many different shops, stores, and traders, both legal and not. One of the newest businesses to open its doors along the docks is the Reef and Scaries. Run by a small family of refugees from the village of Still Point, the Hackling family makes their home upstairs from the shop. The whole family was traveling when the Nether portal opened in Still Point. The village must have been overrun almost instantly, having no army, militia, or even an adventurers guild to find protection. The Hacklings returned from traveling to find nothing but netherrack, lava, and the remains of their friends and neighbors. Unsure if the zombie pigmen would return, Lindsay and Paug packed up their 2 children and left once again, walking quickly down the road. They journeyed the entire way to Port Bray and arrived with nothing but the clothes on their back and a few bags. Seeking sanctuary in the Church of the End, Father Chody comforted them and put them up for a few nights, while Paug went to find work. One of the church's most active congregants, Shelley Caddick, wife of Captain Anton Caddick, befriended Lindsay and helped them settle into life in Port Bray. It was her idea, and her husband vouching for them, that set up Paug running the ship, the Bearded Saber, between the eastern coral reef and Port Bray. It is one of the only known coral reef stores where one can find treasures from beneath the sea of all color variants. Although harvesting a coral reef isn't illegal, it is frowned upon by the Port Bray Dock Authority, and they are always watching closely for any excuse to close down the Hacklings. Paug Hackling was harvesting coral at the eastern reef one day, diving underwater for minutes at a time. Although blaze powder for brewing is still expensive these days, with the Nether invasion these past 10 years, it is much more common than it has been in the past. Thanks to his long-lasting underwater breathing potion, Paug had been harvesting coral for nearly 8 minutes when he started feeling it wearing off. Surfacing, he winced at the bright sunlight in his eyes. The sun was beginning to set, and although the glare was harsh, he thought he could see a shape coming out of the sun. Yelling to his friends on board, who were hard at work sorting out the coral, Paug pointed at the ship sailing from the west. Even with the sun behind it, the sails were black as night. Pirates were headed right at them. Paug climbed on board the Bearded Saber and quickly went to work, lowering the sails, but he could already see it was too late. The ship was close. There would be no escape. Paug Hackling was on a coral mining trip aboard the Bearded Saber when the black sails of a pirate appeared. Sailing out of the west, blinded by the sun, Paug's first mate, Ferdinand, although unwatched, didn't see them until far too late. The pirates were on them. There would be no escape. The crew of the Bearded Saber put down the sails and started the ship moving east, but the pirates had too much speed built up and would easily overtake them soon. As the 2 ships sailed around a small outcropping of rock, another ship appeared. This ship was anchored, hidden from view of the 2 eastbound vessels. The ship's masts were covered in ice, and standing on board were nearly a dozen robed figures, arms held high, chanting a low, indecipherable song. Behind the Bearded Saber, ice began to form, quickly and very purposefully in the direction of the approaching pirates. To the complete bewilderment of Paug and Ferdinand, the ice started to overtake the black-sailed vessel, climbing over the sides of the ship and encasing the entire deck and men in its clear, frosty tome. The pirate ship stopped suddenly, completely covered and surrounded in ice. The Bearded Saber was safe. Paug Hackling and his first mate Ferdinand Keat sat quietly on the Bearded Saber as it sailed towards Port Bray, trying to make sense of what just transpired. Pirates had been pursuing them across the ocean, across the eastern reef, and surely would have overtaken them, except that a mysterious ship appeared from behind a rock outcropping and saved them, somehow. The cloaked figures on the deck of this large vessel were chanting a song of sorts, and ice appeared from nowhere, moving across the water and encasing the pirate ship in a wall of ice. The Bearded Saber had escaped. "It must have been them! I know it must have been!" Ferdinand claimed for at least the 10th time. Neither man had ever seen a frost druid before, but it was the only possible explanation. Frost druids were so rare this far east of their snowy kingdom, few had ever laid eyes on one, let alone a ship carrying a dozen, let alone witness their amazing control of the ice. Many in the eastern kingdoms feared the frost druids and their efforts to protect the world from the nether through ice. Although allies in the war, the means to achieve this victory were a constant source of tension. Ferdinand and Paug discussed the Nether invasion frequently in their coral harvesting trips. Paug was more moderate in his support of the war, supporting King Donal's defensive approach, whereas Ferdinand felt true hatred of these pigmen. He had often talked of traveling far to the west, finding the Frost Druids and joining up with them in their quest to save the world. In just the few hours traveling back to Port Bray, Ferdinand decided it was time. This awesome power they wielded might be enough to actually win the war instead of fighting to a stalemate. He turned in his resignation to his friend Paug and made his preparations for the trip west.